Hey, what's good, everybody? So this one's gonna be about, my bad experiences with the music industry. I was gonna call it my horror stories, but they were bad, but it was more like in a business sense, right? So, I'll just share them real quick. I seen people share their experiences, so I was like, I might as well share mine. It's been a long time and all that, so, it doesn't. Like, I remember one of them in particular used to bother me, but, I'll just talk about them. So I'll get right into it. So the first one, I was still young, teenager. Me and this friend, we started working with this producer that worked at Guitar Center. So, one day he had a client that was like, he was putting together like a $200,000 studio at his house, so the guy had money. And, the guy from Guitar Center invited us. He was like, the producer we were working with, he was like, hey, come down, blah, blah. So, and it was cool. Like, the engineer, his dad had engineered for Easy. We got to rap, like, on a beat made by one of Ice Cube's producers when Ice Cube was really big. I got to rap over Daz Dillinger beat. We got put on this album that had, like, anyone from the West Coast knows who Spice One is, Drew Down, Rappy Forte, Badass, which was always one of my favorite lyricists, R.I.P. So it was a really good album. I don't know if I mentioned Lazy Bone. Lazy Bone was on it too. So, and that's when Bone Thugs was still pretty huge. So yeah, we got on board, but, it was like this guy wanted to start this record company for his son, or like his son wanted to rap, so he was like, all right, I got money, let me start this record company. And but his son couldn't rap, right? Like, I mean, he really tried, but it was like, he couldn't stay on beat kind of stuff. It was like, maybe he was ahead of his time, because I don't know, there's people that rap off beat in it and they become successful and stuff, but back then it wasn't, like, it was still when it mattered, right? So yeah, he just wouldn't stay. It was like, and that's one of those things that, like, when you don't have that, it's kind of hard, right? So anyways, but yeah, we got on board because it was kind of it was a good opportunity, right? But then when it came time to negotiate, I already, I had taken a class on music contracts and this and that. I had read all these books on everything you need to know about the music industry, so I knew enough to know, like, I asked the guy for a certain amount of points, because I was in a group, certain amount of points, guaranteed release date, little things like that are like, they tell you, like, you, no matter what, these are things you ask for. And so the guy, like I don't know, he was acting stupid, or he really didn't know what I was talking about. And he was like, well, I can't guarantee you anything. That's like saying you're gonna put water on a tree and it's gonna grow. And I was just like me and my friend looked at each other like, it's kind of stupid. But I understood his analogy, but like, then what? We're just gonna be giving you all this music, because we recorded a lot of stuff over there. But at the end, we didn't care, because it was a good opportunity, and they didn't release it or nothing, so it was like, whatever, right? So we did it, right? And then after that, we kind of left on bad terms because something else happened. But it was a great experience for starting off, right? And after that, we just put out an album ourselves, right? We got the money together, we put an album out ourselves. So, instead of someone acting funny, like, it kind of sucks, because, you see even like Snoop Dogg and a lot of people that kind of got screwed over, but then they still got something huge out of it, right? They got the fame, they got the this, and then they were able to keep going, right, from that. So I kind of was like, damn, why did I have to know all this stuff? Because, it seems like every artist now, in hindsight, you watch interviews, almost every artist got screwed over at some point. And then once they were in a certain position, they used that to keep going, right? So I was kind of like, shoot, but it's fine. So that was one of the things, right? Dealing with people like that, trying to negotiate shady stuff. The next one's a little worse. It was like, so when we were working on that album we put out as a group at the studio we were recording, there was this guy, a lot of great, like, talented people. Like, the guy that was recording that album, he went on to be like, at one point he was like Jennifer Lopez music director, this and that. So I was around a lot of like talent at that time. And so there was a producer there that, pulled me aside, and he was like, hey, I produce music too, and all this stuff. And so I was like, yeah, we linked up, and then, we recorded a few songs, and I guess even this other song that I had, he gave it to somebody, and they really liked it, right? And this guy was like some kind of vice president at Warner Brothers, but like, I don't know, it was like all these companies have so many companies under them, right? Like some have hundreds even, like, so it was like something under Warner Brothers, and he was like a vice president, right? So they called me on three-way. The guy's telling me how much he really liked my style, this and that. But what he heard of me, it was like my first Spanish song. It was like a super political, very proud of like my heritage, kind of revolutionary song, right? And so this guy was like, giving me all the praise for it. And, but then came the switch up, right? It was like, I don't know if reggaeton had hit yet, or it was barely hitting. Or, see, that's where it gets like, were they behind it kind of thing? Because it was like, this guy, he was an old white guy. And basically he told me he knew what my people needed, and this is what we were going to give them. He's like, yeah, that sounds good and everything, but, this is what your people need, and so we're going to give them that. And I was just like, like the record skipped or whatever, like, you could hear the brakes pump, and you're like, oh, hell no. You know what I mean? Because like I said, I was really proud of my culture. It was like almost like Tupac, but in Spanish, right? Like The Hotter If You Hear Me, the whole Tupacalypse Now album, like that kind of stuff. That's the direction I was going at that time. I was very aware of my culture, very informed. I had a lot of knowledge of self, right? So even like the old Ice Cube kind of stuff, right? So anyways, yeah, I told the producer, like, yeah, you know what, tell this guy, yeah, no thanks. And so, the producer got all like, oh, what, I can't believe it, this and that. And, he went on and did stuff with him, and he produced for, I don't know if it was because of him, but he ended up producing for like Justin Bieber, Demi Lovato. He worked with Whitney Houston's people, all kinds of people. So that producer ended up doing good, right? I burned that bridge. But that was like, it's like me telling a white guy, like, hey, I know what you white people need, and this is what we're gonna do. Or telling a black guy, hey, this is what you guys need, and this is what we're gonna give your people. You know what I mean? So any ethnicity would be insulted by someone telling, and it's because they had the monopoly. The people that have the monopoly over these things. That's why it's good that now people don't need to get signed. Obviously it helps a lot, the financial backing and that, but there's always a price to pay, and then you got to do, I remember Pitbull once, like on the Spanish TV channel, they interviewed him, and he was mad because at that time, I guess, when I tell people like, oh, he used to be like hardcore, they're like, what? And they'll look it up, and they're like, oh wow, like he was pretty dope, aside from the club stuff, right? Like I think his first album that I bought, it only had like 2 club songs on there or something, and all the rest were more like hardcore hip hop. So he did an interview once where he was like, oh, don't even buy this album. He was mad because all they made him do was pure club stuff. See, so they even controlled him, as big of a star as he was. They controlled him to where now, you're gonna put out the club stuff. That's, I guess, your contract or something. But he was upset. So even as a big star as he was, he didn't really have a voice. So that kind of tripped me out, just to show like how I would have been controlled, right? So I was always kind of happy in hindsight that I didn't get controlled like that, right? I had 100% creative freedom to do whatever I wanted with all the albums that I dropped, So yeah, that was that. It was it was that, right? Like some very, I don't know if it's racist, but it's, it falls into that category of, that, like the creepiness of someone saying, this is what your people need, right? So that's kind of, and, also to add to that is like, I had seen that with like hip hop, right? Like, I I feel like hip hop got watered down from the hip hop I grew up listening to the way, you know, and you actually, not even just me assuming, it was like 20 years after the fact, artists came out saying, well, you know, we would try to put out positive songs and they would tell us like, oh, but you're going to do more about horrors and guns and this and that. So it was like, dude, you took 20 years. So, I mean, they sold out. They took the money. So I didn't want the same thing that happened to black hip hop artists to happen to us. You know, at the time that I was doing that, there wasn't a lot of, like, hip hop in Spanish was barely getting its wings, right? And they just crushed it and brought in all the dancey reggaeton stuff. So that's why it would seem like it was more deliberate. You know, I would have been rich. I would have been the next Daddy Yankee, this or that, or next Pitbull, whatever. But, you know, I was so prideful. You know what I mean? I was like, yeah, I'm good. You know what I mean? And so, you know, so that's what happened with that, right? But I remember, like, seeing what happened with hip hop, right? Like, yeah, all the artists that had something to say, you know, like, if you don't want to play ball, you get shelved. You know, it's that simple. So anyways, that's pretty much that story. It was funny because even, like, man, over 10 years later, I don't even think that guy remembered me, but it was the same guy. I was working with this other producer, and he wanted one of my songs for this compilation album they were doing for the record company he was working at then. I don't even think this guy remembered who I was, you know, the older white guy. And he emailed me 3 times for this song, and every time I turned him down. Because even then, he was still shady. They wanted to use one of my songs, and I was going to get no publishing. It was like such a horrible contract. It was just garbage, right? And he was like, oh, and he came back like, no, I really like that song. Don't you want a music video? Don't you want this? Don't you want that? It's going to be on this big compilation. I was like, you know, but I wasn't going to get no publishing from a song that, you know, that I did, that came out of me, a song I really liked, because that's why he asked me 3 times for it, and I kept telling him no, till finally, you know, he left it alone. But I thought it was funny that all those years later, that guy was still up to his same tricks, you know. So anyways, blah blah with that. So then the other story was with that producer I was working with. You know, I went through a lot with him. You know, at the time I always had, like, you know, pretty women around me, you know, or young ladies. You know, I was young, so, you know, it was you know, like, you know, they were my age, so it was like, you know, 18, 19, 20. That's when I was really trying to get signed, or I don't know if I was a little, maybe 21, 22, I don't know. But anyways, like, you know, I always had pretty women around me, right? So I had gone to this guy's studio with a friend of mine, right? You know, attractive, you know, Mexican woman, like long hair, you know, nice body or great body, whatever. So that guy was always asking, oh, you know, I'd go to work on music, and he'd always be like, you know, you know, you should bring some girls, or bring girls, or hey man, hook me up with some, you know. And I would be looking at him like, dude, like, you can't get your own women, like, what the hell? You know, you're this producer, dude, this and that, like, you can't even, well, you don't know how to talk to women or what? So it would be irritating, because I drive like over an hour, and then like 2 hours back in traffic. Anyone that knows LA traffic, to where this guy lived. So I would get irritated that I'd go over there, and this dude would always be asking me, like, to bring women. And so then even, like, I remember he was all like, Mr. like, I'm this religious guy. And I went once, and he was, oh, look at my friend went to Brazil and playing, like, he shot this, like, people having sex in front of everybody, all this crazy, however they party over there, right? So, and then again, I'd be like, dude, I drove all this way to work on music. I was serious about the music, right? I wasn't playing. Okay, so the camera got too hot. That's never happened before. But so to end the story, so, you know, this guy wasted a lot of my time, and so eventually I got fed up with him. You know, I gave him a call. I was like, hey man, I pray to God that I never run into you. You know, because he still worked with some of the people I knew. So, you know, then he calls me back, leaves me a message, you know, because he didn't even answer when I called him. Because, you know, he was starting to, like, kind of, you know, he wouldn't answer my calls and all that. So I told him, hey man, I pray to God I never run into you. And then he called me back all crying, like, you know, you threatened my life, and I have a wife, and I have kids, and this and that. And I was like, what? Like, dude, all these times you asked me to take you women, you never mentioned you had a wife, you never mentioned you had kids, all this stuff. Now all of a sudden you felt like your life was in danger, so you're over here crying and stuff, whatever. So, you know, that was it for that. Actually, even that, because I was so upset, like, I ended up leaving to the Marines because I got tired of all the BS with the music. So there was other BS, I guess, that I had dealt with. But that was kind of like where I was like, you know what? If I stay, I'm going to hurt somebody. That's it. So I took all that energy that I had, you know, of just dealing with all that stuff. You know, because by then it was a lot. I just can't remember, like, I know there was a lot to be fed up at that point, you know, because that guy too, you know, I scared him to where, you know, it was just like, hey, that's all I had at that time. You know, I was trying to do the music thing. So, like, people playing with you, you know, it was no joke, right? So, you know, after I told them that, then whatever. And then, I ended up taking off because I was like, you know, I couldn't deal with the BS no more. And people weren't, you know, it was like that. Like, people that pretended to be something that they weren't, right? So I didn't want to deal with all these phony people, right? And so that's the end of that story. That was my 3 ones that are the most memorable, like my bad experiences with the music industry. And so eventually I just started doing it myself, putting out my own stuff. It works out a lot better like that. You don't have to deal with the headaches and all this and that. Obviously, getting signed gives you the financial backing, but now in the age, you know, back then, when I think when I dealt with all those experiences, there was still no, I think MySpace didn't come out really until when I came back from the Marines. That's when MySpace was starting to happen, and I utilized it, you know, and all that stuff. So, and then they shut it down. So I was like, oh man, I think I had like 45,000 people on MySpace. I was like already doing, I had at least an album out. I was promoting it, getting overseas sales, everything. And then they just kind of shut it down. And then I kind of got tired of all that stuff, and I didn't really push it too much. So it was funny, you know, just to add that little extra tidbit of information, right? So those are my experiences. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If I think of any other stories, I'll share them as well. Let me know if you guys had any crazy experiences with the music industry or other things, right? You know, I'll share some acting stories later too. Stuff like that. All right, peace.
Baby, don't you know you're the greatest?
You're the greatest, baby.
And you will never, never